Howdy, and welcome to the Aggie Teach Momentum podcast, brought to you by the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences program at Texas A&M University. I am your host, Kendrick Davies, former high school physics and astronomy teacher and current program manager for Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences. This podcast is meant to provide a little more insight and information to those seeking a secondary content teacher certification in Texas. We aim to provide episodes that help pre-service educators on the path to certification, as well as leverage the experience of myself and other guest speakers to support teachers in their first few years in the classroom. And today's topic is a great one. We have a superintendent with us. So our topic is the role of the superintendent within a school district. Please welcome Dr. Matthew Neighbors, who is the superintendent for Galveston ISD. Thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Kendrick, thank you so much for this opportunity to come back and speak to the newer Aggies. I consider myself old Army because I graduated before the year 2000. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we always welcome the opportunity to welcome back alumni from Texas A&M University, especially Aggies who have gone into the educational field. And we look forward to a great conversation. And hopefully our listeners will get some really good information, advice. So let's start with just you. You are an Aggie, obviously, but tell us a little bit about your history and how you got into education and how did you become the superintendent for Galveston ISD?
Sure. So again, most importantly for this conversation, I did graduate from the A&M College of Education and Human Development, won the Gathright Award in 1996. Most important, married an Aggie girlfriend. I think that's the secret to my success. I was in the classroom for 17 years. I think that's unique amongst superintendents in the state of Texas and probably across the country. That I did not just hop immediately into administration. That was not my career path. I really thought I was going to be a classroom teacher and coach for a long, long time. The one thing I learned at A&M that I will remember that sort of helped me, I think, even amongst my peers, when I first started, was just the emphasis on professionalism, doing your job well and with excellence. I felt like that was instilled within me along with the other Aggie core values, and I was very appreciative of that. After being in the classroom for 17 years, I kind of followed the traditional path upward. I became an instructional coach, assistant principal, and then was at the district office for a few years before becoming superintendent. So it's been quite a journey.
That sounds like a journey. And I'll circle back around to that idea of you being a classroom teacher for so many years and how that's not the norm. And as a former educator, as an educator, I certainly appreciate that, having someone at the higher levels of administration who has the background of being an educator. So I can certainly echo the value in that. And we appreciate the thoughts that you put around, what you do at the administrative level, knowing the background of teachers. So as a superintendent, I'm reflecting on my first years in the classroom and thinking, okay, I'm focused on my four walls, I'm focused on my students, and there is this ethereal office over here that is the superintendent. Can you kind of give us what is the lowdown? What is the role of a superintendent for a district? What do you do, and how do you interact or influence what happens in the classroom?
Sure. So being a superintendent is very unique in anyone's career. So especially someone who is a new superintendent, there's a little bit of an adjustment. It's almost, I guess the easiest way to describe it is if you're familiar with sort of a city council and a city manager type government, that's kind of how school districts are run. So there's a board of trustees in Texas. It's typically 7 elected members from the community, and they are all in volunteer roles, but they collectively hire the superintendent. And then everyone else in the district technically works for the superintendent. So the superintendent is the sort of the CEO of the district, but it's for the first time in a lot of people's careers as superintendent that you answer to 7 bosses instead of having a direct report to one person. So I think it's important to know that the superintendent is responsible for executing all the policies and the procedures, but they really are beholden to these community members who are hearing from the community and know which directions they want the school to go, know areas they want to see improved. And so the superintendent is really the one who's responsible for carrying that out. And so you do have some latitude and some influence in that, but you're really carrying out the initiatives and the directives of the school board. So, there are a lot of people in between the superintendent and the classroom teacher. Because I have been in Galveston for so long, I was in the district for 21 years before I became the superintendent. So I try to spend every single morning on a campus before I come into the office. So I will stop by at arrival, get to see some students and some families, and I'll talk to the teachers. And They still make me wear my badge when I come in. They'll smile and laugh because I'll usually enter in through a back door, or I'll come in with the kids as they're getting off the bus. And so I'm very seldom am I checking into the front office like I'm supposed to. But other than that, yeah, I love going around to classrooms. We once a month we do what are called boardwalks, and so we pick an area of emphasis and we tour the school board around different classrooms. So this past month, bilingual was our emphasis, and we went to 2 different campuses and looked at the bilingual programs. And so we were in teachers' classrooms, and teachers were telling us about how they taught 50% in Spanish and 50% in English in this one class, and talking about the different writing practices that they do.
Mhm.
So fortunately, I can be in classrooms as much as I want to be, and I try to make that a priority and try to give those board members who I'm responsible answering to firsthand experiences, because I have so much firsthand experience in the classroom and know how it
Right.
operates. But I want them to see, instead of just hearing PowerPoint presentation or hearing reports at board meetings, getting to go see it firsthand helps them be more confident when they're in the community to answer questions about our programs. And so that's right now, strategically, that's how I'm trying to not only interact with teachers myself, but also get my board to be more interactive with the teachers.
Nice. So I mean, so you're essentially the, I don't want to say the go-between, but you're the bridge, right, between what is happening in the community and what's happening in education, and what the community wants to see in their public education, but also you're showing the community members, the school board members, what is the reality of classroom education and teachers. I can actually, reflect on a few times in both the places that I taught where I had school board members come into my classroom to see what was going on. I had the superintendent come into my classroom to see what was going on. So yeah, I mean that's a great bridge. So speaking of that kind of school board part of it, right? You're the public face of the school district. So how is it that you communicate with the public, the community? Is it essentially through school board meetings, or are there other aspects of you being the face of the school district?
Sure. So we have a strategic marketing person, and we also have a communications person. So communications is more notices going out, emergency communications, just sort of that ebb and flow of regular information that needs to be shared back and forth. But there's also strategic marketing, and school districts are competing for students with other entities in our communities across the state of Texas. Also, we are trying to market to our internal stakeholders. We want to make sure that teachers and students and families know all the amazing programs that we have and all the opportunities that are available to them. So there's a lot more of that at the superintendent level than probably you see at any other time in your career, when you finally get here and realize that you've got to sort of sell the district and sell the campuses. And so that's exciting, because we have a lot of positive things to brag about. And so I think that you kind of have internal and external stakeholders that you have to be responsible to, that you have to really communicate well with. And in Galveston, we have a strong network of community partners and nonprofit organizations that also help us. We've got a high percentage of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so we can't meet all those needs ourselves, but partnering with all these other organizations who are already serving those families and now have even better access because we are working with them. And we've got some exciting things going. We partner with a group that right now we are sort of kind of creating a database so that every social worker, every counselor, every communities in the schools person across the entire district, anytime they touch a student, if they give a student a backpack, or if they counsel a student, that all that goes into a common database. And so we're able
Mhm.
to see how much support each student or each family is getting across the entire district, and how many touch points we have with those families throughout the year. Because a lot of times a family may have students at different campuses, an elementary campus and a middle school campus or something. And the communication hasn't always been great about, oh, well, I'm helping the student here, or I'm helping the student here, and not realizing how much
Right.
support that whole family is getting. So that's just one example of sort of helping coordinate that effort. And then, of course, you get interviewed by a lot of media outlets anytime there's an issue in the newspaper or things like that. So you do have to, just be careful and be intentional about what you say about the district. And you really can't go out to dinner in a community our size without somebody knowing you. So you need to learn to be a good tipper too.
Nice. Yeah, I could see that being. I had as a teacher. You really can't go out and eat in a smaller community without seeing one of your students. And so yeah, having that public face. So yeah, I mean, you're essentially connecting programs, resources to students, right? You're I like how you put it. You're selling the district, making sure that it's going to be the best for the community. And I think, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're also sort of marketing your district to educators, right? And you're trying to entice educators to come in. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity at the end of our time to sell us on Galveston ISD and ask why should the new teacher come to Galveston ISD. But I'll leave that conversation for a little bit later. So part of that marketing, I guess, part of that resources that you're connecting has to do with budget. I know that's a big thing, especially right now with the legislature in session. And how is it that you, as the superintendent, influence that budgetary process? And really, what does it look like from the classroom teacher standpoint? Are you, counting the number of pencils that get given to a teacher, or are you kind of on the broader side of uh, this amount of money has to be split so many ways? So give us a kind of a rundown of what the budgetary process looks like.
Yeah, Kendrick, such a timely question. We're actually, when I leave this conversation with you, I'm going to be meeting with the presidents of all of our PTOs across the entire district. So all the leadership. So that we've got about
Wow.
30 parents coming in, and they are the parents who've been elected to serve for next school year. And one of the topics is school finance 101. So I'm just going to kind of give them a very brief explanation of how school finance works in the state of Texas. And for them, it's to help them understand why their fundraising is important, like why them meeting specific needs on a campus still needs to be done, even after the district pays for the things that we need to pay for. So just helping them understand why there are some gaps in our funding and why there are needs that parents and other groups who are helping support us, can actually meet those needs. So I'm really excited about that. And the budgetary process is, again, we're kind of limited by the state in how much money we can actually spend. So our overall budget is really limited by the state. The state says, okay, you have X number of kids, you get X number of dollars. And those kids can't just be enrolled, they have to attend. So it's your attendance rate times your number of kids. Now, if a student needs special ed services or bilingual services, you get a little bit of extra money for those students versus just a normal student. But right. So in general, you'll hear this $6,000 term thrown out a bunch, and that's kind of for your basic student. And then if a student needs, a specialized bus to get to school or some other things, you get a little bit of extra funding for them. So I would say most schools in the state of Texas, by the time you add up all those other multipliers, probably average out around $10,000 per kid is about what we get. And so you're hearing that number thrown out, for school vouchers possibly, because that's about what it costs to educate each student. What the state doesn't do is sometimes take into account these other factors. So for example, we're down on the coast and our cost of insurance is sky high for flood and windstorm insurance that, a school in, Midland or Odessa is probably not going to experience. And so even though we're all getting the same amount of money, we all have different costs. And so that's kind of our frustration with the state, is that they don't sometimes take those things into consideration. But it's my job to help the school board understand where we can possibly cut, how much of a pay raise can we give. The school board ultimately approves the budget, and they give us budget priorities. They're like, hey, we really want a 5% raise. I don't care what else you have to cut or what else you have to do. Show us what sacrifices we have to make to get to a 5% raise. Or they may say, next year our goal is we really want to build a new playground at the elementary school. So make whatever other cuts you have to. So the board gives us priorities. And again, it's the superintendent and the finance team's job to make those a reality.
Yeah. So I being in the classroom, we have essentially two buckets that we have to worry about, right? You have the facilities side of things and you have the personnel side of things. And so your job is to say, okay, well, we can spend this much in this bucket, this much in this bucket. And what priorities do we have? I want to ask a follow-up question about sort of tax elections, right? I mean, this part of the money for a school district does come from property values, property taxes, and sometimes there's tax elections. What does that process sort of look like? When do you decide to go to the community and ask for a little bit more money?
Yeah, so we currently have a bond for construction. We're building a brand new high school and we're renovating all of our middle schools with a bond. And so it's about a 6-month process. You have community meetings, you get some community leaders to weigh in on the priorities, and because they're the ones who ultimately are going to vote for it. And so you kind of need to float the different projects and float the different possible costs to some, a small sort of core group of community members and say, okay, does this seem reasonable? Does this seem like something that you would support? And then you put it up for election. And currently you have to get at least 50% of the vote to pass a bond. I know there's legislation that might change that in the future, but school districts that are able to pass bonds, even if it's for facilities, it helps the rest of your funding, because then you're able to repair an air conditioner, you're able to repair a boiler or put up new fencing around a school and not dip into your regular budget. So I think if you look at the districts across the state who are paying teachers really well and competitively, you're going to see that they're regularly passing those facility bonds because it's a way of sort of bolstering their budgets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, it's kind of one of those things that you have to think about as a community member, right? I mean, part of your taxes go for the betterment of the community, and the betterment of the community is centered around public education. In a lot of cases, facilities around that, programs you can offer. That makes a lot of sense. So, I again thinking about my own interactions with the school board, I know that there's a lot of times where a school board will go through sort of a process where they're looking at other districts or looking at other school systems and seeing what is it that may be able to happen in their district. What can they learn about? So I'm going to ask this question, kind of it's a broad question. Are you aware of any trends or innovations in education right now that excite you, that a new teacher should be aware of as they're about to go into the profession?
Yeah, there's a few trends, and I'm sure all of your students are aware of these. But first one I would say is science of reading is like a huge hot button topic, and that's the new term for phonics. So when your parents or grandparents ask you what is the science of reading, just tell them, hey, this is the new term for back to the basics phonics education. But if you don't have that training in your program, then it'll be one of the first things you have to do right now if you're K through 3 teacher. But again, there's legislation that may push that to K through 5. So if you're an elementary teacher and you're going to be teaching reading, teaching kids how to read, there's a new emphasis on making sure that you have that training, that you know how to teach a kid how to put together sounds and how to sort of decode letters and words and sentences, and then hopefully help them understand that. So that's a huge push across the state. Another big push is that the state, since COVID, has been having, and I'm talking about all districts across the state, have been having to hire more and more teachers who are not fully certified. So you have your bachelor's degree, but you're still waiting for that certification test. And I would say pass all your certification exams. I cannot emphasize that enough for a new teacher. If you are fully certified, you are in a position where you have a lot more power. Like, you have a lot more opportunities. You're going to have a lot more offers. So right now, new teachers coming into the field that have all their certification exams already completed and passed, you've set yourself up really well. And then the last thing is there's a newfound emphasis. There used to be this thing called student teaching, where you would go for an entire semester and donate your time to the district. No one does that anymore. Everyone will pay you for either observation or internship hours. So they want you to have as much experience as possible before you actually take over your own classroom. And I would say that on your resume and on your applications, young new teachers, you need to be emphasizing all of the quality time that you spend with students, even if it's not in a classroom setting. So you go and help with a summer camp where you are the leader of 8 young middle school students for an entire summer, or you teach swim lessons, or you are helping somebody with driver's ed. Like, just all the touch points that you have interacting with students and helping teach them, that really kind of bolsters your application. And so I would say that those are all 3 things that are sort of trending right now that they want to see more of young teachers.
Speaking about Aggie Teach specifically, the program that is putting on this podcast, I'd say 2 out of the 3 of those things are central to what we do. Since we're a secondary program, we don't really deal much with the science of teaching and reading, but I know that that's a big thing happening in the elementary programs here at A&M's campus. But the idea of hours, right? And the observation hours, we do go a little bit above and beyond what is minimally required by the State Board of Education. So we're already there. And I know a lot of our districts that we partner with and we talk to are grateful of Aggie educators because of what we do and the amount of commitment we have and the amount of resources and requirements that we already meet, coming out of it. So, but yeah, I've heard of that trend of uncertified teachers coming into the classroom. What sort of problems do you see around that? If an uncertified teacher is coming into the classroom, do they have the same sort of retention rates as what a university program teacher has?
Yeah, so the data from the commissioner shows that not only is their retention rate less, but also their student outcomes are less in their classrooms. And originally there were some workarounds created for certification for districts of innovation, and it was intended to be for mainly career and technical education people. So if I've been a career welder for 15 years, even though I don't have my certification, I should be able to come in and teach kids how to weld. And that was really the intention of some of these ways of bypassing the certification. But districts, of course, stretched that rule and have hired more and more uncertified teachers in core areas. And so the state legislature is pushing back on that. What again, the state session doesn't end here for a couple more weeks, but they are proposing sort of ratcheting down. Like, let's say that right now you hire 25% uncertified new teachers, right? Brand new teachers,
Right.
first year. That in 2 years that has to be 20%. In 2 more years that has to be 15%, then 10%, and then ultimately their goal is that no more than 5% of teachers being hired by districts would be uncertified. So I think that whether it's by choice or whether it's by legislation, you're going to see districts trying to find more and more fully certified teachers. A lot of times right now they hire them and give them like a year to finish their certification, but you're going to start losing that year of grace and you're going to need to be certified before you get hired.
Right. I mean, so going back again to Aggie Teach, I mean, like that just really shows that our students coming into the field are incredibly well prepared and are positioned to succeed in the district because of their preparation programs. And then back to that idea of clinical teaching, right? We've seen several districts that have been offering sort of a pay for that experience now, and of course, the state of Texas is moving, at least pushing the idea of residencies as being a full year sort of clinical teaching experience. So we know that that's kind of in the mix now, and A&M is kind of wrestling with what that looks like. So yeah, a lot of changes happening in education. Thinking about your time as an educator, administrator, superintendent, I have a question about like what have you seen in the classroom? What have you seen from teachers that they do early on in their career that help them stay motivated, help them stay in the classroom, increase their retention? And maybe it's what was your first year like in the classroom? What did you do to stick around?
Sure. So I would say my first piece of advice before I tell you my own harrowing tales is I think that successful teachers primarily are reflective. And so you're teaching that first year, second year, third year, you should be making notes at the end of every day. This lesson, I had 12 students and man, it went so fast and I ran out of things to do. And I had to kill 10 minutes at the end of class, but then I taught the same lesson with a group of 30 kids and I was 5 minutes short, so you start to realize that you had a good plan, but even the number of kids in your class forces you to alter the plan a little bit, right? And so you don't know those things unless you're making notes so that the next year when you come back to that lesson, you're not making that same mistake. You're like, oh, okay, I remember from last year. Yeah, I need to add an activity for the smaller classes. And if it's a larger class, I got to move with some good pace. So if you're constantly looking to improve year over year, those are the teachers that last. Those are the teachers that stick with it because they realize that there's room to improve and they're constantly, even outside of, you're going to have tons of people coming and watching you teach. Right. You're going to have all kinds of mentors. You're going to have all kinds of coaches, but take ownership of some of that yourself and just realize that they can't be in there every single minute of every single day. And so if you're making some notes to yourself, and so that again, because sometimes you are literally not going to be able to teach that lesson again until a year from now. And so a year from now, don't be making those same mistakes. And so you've got to come up with a little bit of a system for how you do that. And I had when I was student teaching, I had someone sort of teach me that, and I followed that, and it just helps. It helps me, progress a lot faster than some other first year teachers. But as a first year teacher, you're always going to have those times when you don't succeed. So the story I share a lot is I took over for a teacher in January. She had been pregnant, she had a baby, and she left. So of course she was beloved by her students. And I was in a portable building out behind a school. So there was nobody around me on left or right. I'm in this little bitty portable and I've got all these kids. And so, the kids weren't super happy to have some young new graduate, teaching them when they had this, wonderful mom to be, who was their former teacher. And so this one day, these two young boys kind of get into a scuffle in my class, and I'm, trying to stop it, but they just burst out the door and they start to run down the sidewalk. And so I run to the door and I'm standing in the doorway and I've got 25 kids sitting in my classroom, stunned, right? They're all just sitting there like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And I see these two boys just running down the sidewalk and running off campus and running off into the woods. And I'm like, I realized at that point I was just helpless. Like, what do? I can't go chase them. There's nobody I can go knock on the door. There was no emergency button. I mean, I'm just standing there, and I was so furious with myself that I let that happen. And so that summer, I taught summer school and had 3 or 4 veteran teachers sort of wrap their arms around me and help me, because in summer school you teach some of the toughest students. And then after that, I went and sought out every classroom management training that I could possibly find. I mean, I've done it all. You name it, and I've done it. And that became a strength of mine. I mean, I had, by the end of my career, people were coming in and trying to see how I organized my classroom and how I had things set up. And so, but it came from a sense of, I'm never going to let that mistake happen again. And so you just have those things that happen to you in your first year, and you realize that, man, I wish I could go back and teach those kids again 10 years later when I'm in a much better place as an educator. But
Right.
there's a lot of grace for first year teachers. It's super hard. My wife was in nursing school. Every night she would come home and she would be on her computer studying medical stuff. I'd be on my computer writing lesson plans for the next day. So those are sweet, but sweet memories. But it's always a tough time. You just have to sort of fight through it, and every year gets better.
Yeah, I'd say there's two main themes I think of what you were just talking about, and one is always look to be better, right? And I think really that kind of sums up everything. Always look to be better. When I was a teacher, I was never wanting to do the same thing every year. Like it was not going to be, oh, let me go to my filing cabinet and pull out the worksheet for the day, and that's what I did every year. No, I was always looking for what is the better way of doing this particular activity or this particular topic, and then what you also talked about was when you see a need, when you see a deficiency, when you see an area of growth, that you attack it, right? You go and you learn and you try to be better, and you also lean into the veterans, right? You lean into the people who can help you. So I think that's some really really great advice. And believe it or not, I think we're pretty close to the end of our time. It's been a great discussion, but as a thank you for being on our podcast, I want to throw it back to you and say, yeah, all right, Galveston ISD. Why should a new teacher, why should one of our graduates come to Galveston ISD?
Sure. And I guess my thing would say, number one, you need to come work for an Aggie.
Of course, right?
Let's go, right? I mean, so that should cut out a whole lot of districts right there. Teaching is a phenomenal profession. And what's one really cool thing about it is you can do it anywhere. You can teach anywhere. You can go to Alaska. We have teachers here who have spent some time in Alaska. We've got a teacher that we just hired from Nebraska. You can go almost anywhere in the United States and teach. I think Texas particularly is a great place to teach because we've got such a strong retirement system. We've got very strong community support for our schools. And I do think that especially public education is in a really healthy place right now. And then Galveston specifically, I mean, think about where do you want to forge a life. Choose a place where you're going to enjoy the entire community and the entire experience, because the classroom is going to be fairly similar. I mean, you're going to make the environment in the classroom what you want it to be. Like that's going to be your world. That's going to be where you live. And so outside of that classroom, Galveston has almost 8,000 residents that are between the ages of 18 and 24, because we've got 3 universities on the island. We have tons of festivals, restaurants, culture. We have a sandcastle competition. This weekend, we've got a surfing competition and a music festival. There's just a ton of really fun, family-friendly things to do here on the island. And so we have a group of 10 teachers every year that we recruit from Spain. They come from Madrid, Spain. Nice. And the first year we had 5 come over, and that program also placed teachers in other, I won't name anyone, but they placed teachers in other communities around Texas. And by the end of the school year, everybody wanted to be in Galveston. They were so jealous of the teachers who got assigned to Galveston. And so now we're up to 10 teachers that we have every year from that program, because they are just demanding to want to come here. And we love having bilingual teachers. They can stay for 3 to 5 years. And it adds to our culture, and it adds to our teaching ranks. But I just think that I wish more people knew, like, again, you want to come live down on the island, you can live downtown, which is really hip, and there's all these downtown lofts where people live, or you can live in a historic home, or you can live in a beach condo. I mean, there's just a lot of variety here, and I just find that people who come here enjoy the entire community, and it's about what happens outside those 4 walls of the classroom. We've got strong support. We have a vision and mission for teaching, not just for the district as a whole. We have TIA, and TIA is available for every single teacher. You go to a lot of districts, and only if you're a math or a reading teacher can you qualify for the teacher incentive allotment. Here, every single teacher, K through 12, can qualify for TIA. We have 450 teachers, and currently 119 of them are qualified for some level of TIA. So, it's a unique and just a really, really, really cool place to live, and to be a young person. There's just a lot happening here.
All right. And that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Neighbors, for being a guest today. The Aggie Teach Momentum podcast drops every 2 weeks, so make sure that you are looking for the next episode on Spotify or linked on the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences website. For more information, you can visit our program website at aggieteachartsci.tamu.edu. That's aggieteach, ARTSCI.tamu.edu. Thanks, and gig 'em.
Gig 'em.